Buenos dias, mi amigos, and welcome to Independence Plaza in Montevideo, the capital of the beautiful South American nation of Uruguay. Today, we're talking what's going on in Uruguay. We're gonna go into the history, a little into the culture, we're gonna eat some food, and we're gonna unpack this country that most people have never heard of. Let's do it. We'll start today's adventure in the Plaza Independencia, this very central square here in Montevideo, a place where they have protests, where they have national rallies, and a place that has a lot of national meaning to the people here. So we can see here, we've got a big square with a large statue in the middle. We have some very interesting mix of buildings between something more modern, something more colonial, very like Spanish, or we can call it Portuguese, kind of colonial Renaissance. Over here we have the largest theater, the second largest theater in South America. But the most important part and the most notorious building here in the Plaza Independencia in Montevideo is this, the Palacio Salvo, which was built or finished in 1928. It was built by an Italian immigrant, and it is this very interesting Art Deco conglomeration of styles in a sort of very regal but very epic way, which I really like it. I think this whole area, Argentina, Uruguay, maybe southern Brazil, they have a lot in common, but each one has its own narrative, which is truly unique. They all, the centers of their city, they all have this sort of colonial style, but with a very different twist. They have a beautiful old town here, but we're actually not gonna go there today because on the weekends, it's very dead, especially on a sleepy Sunday. So now we're gonna head to a market and we are going to see what the local people of Uruguay get into. Before we move on to our next segment, I will say, guys, I'm a bit disappointed. I bought this drone, right? So I had an original drone, DJI, and I flew it, you know, all around a little bit. I used it in Greece. If you saw the videos, there's definitely some drone footage. And then I got confiscated in Morocco. So then I bought a new drone for this upcoming trip in South America, and I was very excited about it. And as I was filming just a couple minutes ago, this happened to my drone. And you know how this happened, guys? A fucking eagle swooped out of the sky and destroyed my drone. It was landing, and the eagle thought that it was a small baby bird, and it decided to destroy my second drone, which means there's gonna be no more drone footage, but the drone footage in this segment, which you guys are seeing now, pretty damn impressive. So no more drone footage the rest of this trip. Very sad about that, but so goes life. And if you fly drones in Montevideo, watch out for eagles. We've made it to the city center of Montevideo, where it seems like a little bit more of the action is happening. If you come here on a Saturday or Sunday, it's like everything's closed in the actual center and the old center, so you're gonna have to go somewhere else. But we're at a place called the Feria de Tristan Navaja. This is a big market like what you guys saw in Argentina if you watched that video before. And this is really where it's all going down. So let me tell you a little bit about Uruguay, and then we're gonna head in there. So behind me here is one of the big national buildings, and the style is very, very impressive. And over here we have, for example, like an old church. We have a very interesting sort of modern take on some art back here. And Uruguay, for those of you that don't know, is a very small, the smallest in fact, South American country. It borders Argentina, it borders Brazil, and I believe it borders Paraguay, although I might be incorrect. No, it doesn't border Paraguay. And the culture here is very distinct and very interesting. While it does have a lot of similarities from at least architecture, from culture, and from history to Argentina, the Uruguayans have built a society that, let's say diverted from the Argentinian way quite a long period of time ago. What you'll find here is really interesting European style art. You'll find that the capital city of Montevideo, which is just about 1.3 million people, maybe a little bit bigger, is basically where all of the commerce and all of everything happens in the country. Montevideo sits on the coast and became a trading hub at a very similar time that Buenos Aires was kind of arising from from Spanish colonial period. So Montevideo kind of grew at the same time as Buenos Aires, but had a bit of a different history and a bit of a different precedent that was set. To go into the history really quickly, Uruguay was of course pre-colonial for a long period of time until the Spanish came here in the mid-1500s and started establishing settlements. The first settlement that was really established here, at least a big one, was Colonia de Sacramento, which was actually established by the Portuguese and not the Spanish. The Spanish then kind of came in, took the rest of it, and Uruguay became a chunk of this Rio de la Plata area, which included Buenos Aires, and the Rio de la Plata has this basin where a lot of trade activity between Spain and this chunk of South America happened. Long story super short is there was this thing called the Viceroy of Spain. The Viceroy of Spain was in charge of a lot of this chunk of South America, and it was sort of a parallel state to the Spanish colonial empire, as the Spanish colonial empire was sort of falling apart and it needed to give their colonies a little bit of autonomy. Basically, out of that viceroy, there were royalists, which were people that were supporting being part of Spain, just like what we have in the United States, and there were separatists, just like what we would call like our revolutionaries. And throughout that period in the early 1800s, the late 1700s, a lot of people were fighting for independence for these regions: Uruguay, Argentina, Chile, and then of course Brazil. Brazil fell later from the Portuguese, so this was a really important place for separatist movements because the Brazilians actually wanted to shut it down. So Brazil actually sent in troops to Uruguay to try to calm it, but it didn't happen. So anyways, Uruguay becomes a state, and it's been an autonomous state since I believe like 1830 something. 150 years later, after socialist revolutions, military dictatorships, fights for independence, economic booms and economic failings, we are here in Montevideo in 2022. So we're gonna head into the market and we're gonna look at some cultural things that make Uruguay very particular, and we're gonna talk about that now. So welcome to the Mercado Tristan Navaja. I think of Uruguay is known for three things. Number one would be soccer. They have some of the best soccer players in the world. What comes to mind is Uruguay when they played, I'm trying to remember who they were playing, but anyways, Luis Suarez is one of their main characters, one of the best players. He's played all over Europe, and he's very notorious for handballing their way to one of the championships, or the World Cup Championship, and also biting a player and getting suspended for biting people. So that's what I think of with the Uruguay number one. Uruguay number two is I think of Yerba mate. If you guys are looking to the people in front of me, some of them you might see are holding mate. Mate is a traditional drink, which is something like tea. It has caffeine in it. They kind of have their own apparatus for it. It has a straw, and people often bring hot water with them. So you can see this girl here has it, this other girl has it. Everybody pretty much has it. They say Argentina is very famous for mate, but I think Uruguay probably wins that in the amount of people actually drinking it. And number three is meat. Uruguayans are really notorious meat eaters. They make different delicious parrillas like they do in Argentina. These grills where they're grilling up steak, sausage, chorizo, all of this good stuff. And those are what you need to know about Uruguay, at least on the surface. Whoa, pause the video. So you can see this guy on the left here, he's got the mate in his hand. The metal straw is called a bombilla, and you cannot move it. And oddly enough, he carries a thermoflask with him as they continue to add hot water into the mix non-stop all throughout the day that they're carrying this. So for those of you that watch this that are mate drinkers, and for those of you that aren't, the one thing I find super funny about mate is that it seems really cumbersome, really like not comfortable to carry with you. So everyone is carrying this little pot thing, so you can see it. You can pretty much see it everywhere. And so they have their little pot, and then, but they also carry, for example, if you see that lady, she is carrying a big thermos of hot water because you have to continually fill your mate. In the tradition of mate, you're not supposed to throw it out and you're not supposed to move the straw. You're supposed to just continue refilling it and refilling it and refilling it. So it's funny that people would want to walk around with gigantic thermoses in their hands all day. I don't understand it. So get ready, we're gonna count the mates in this next 10-second clip. 3, 2, 1, go. So out of 8 people, I counted 4 mates. Did you guys get that? One thing I find particularly interesting about Uruguay is that while you might smell the delicious smells of the parrilla, the grill, wafting through the air in open air markets like this, what you'll also smell a lot of is the smell of marijuana. And the reason for that is that Uruguay was the first country in the world in 2013 to completely decriminalize, legalize both medical and recreational use of marijuana. And here they also have a pretty lenient policy on almost all drugs that you would find that could be sold on the street. So for example, you could have something like 40 grams of marijuana and it's totally legal. And so like here you can smell over here, these guys are smoking a lot of weed. And it's just like, it's interesting that it's so normal for here, whereas in other places it's so challenging. In my kind of summary, I would think Uruguay is a bit like the little brother of Argentina, but also the little brother of Brazil, as there are some definite commonalities in both history and in culture, maybe here to Brazil more so than Argentina to Brazil. The one thing is that the Spanish in this country is nearly impossible for me to understand. Argentina is a little challenging, but Spanish in Uruguay is really hard. They have very, very strong sounds here. So I've almost not been able to understand anything anyone says to me, which is kind of sad, but kind of interesting, as they of course are a Spanish-speaking nation. One thing that you'll definitely notice when you come to Uruguay is that being the smallest country in South America in an overall area that isn't particularly that expensive, Uruguay happens to be the most expensive country in the entire region. Some of it is because of monetary protection, because their economy wasn't necessarily super liberalized for the last 40 years. After they disbanded socialism here for a little bit, they opened their market to the free market system, but there's been a lot of institutional protection over market values of things. So actually this country is quite expensive. You'll find that eating at a restaurant costs about the same as eating at a restaurant in, you know, maybe like France or Italy. It's definitely not a cheap destination. The hotel I was staying in was only $50 a night, which is, I think, pretty reasonable. You wouldn't necessarily find that in Italy. But the cost of food, goods, and services are expensive, and a lot of expats from here actually end up going abroad in order to buy things for cheaper, especially going to Argentina or going to Brazil, or even going back to the United States for clothes and other goods. This place is super impressive. It just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. It's very, they've definitely set something up here. This is one of the bigger markets that I've been to in quite a while. And it's funny because the city center itself is completely dead on the weekends, but it seems like everybody's out here shopping, buying things. So like, for example, if you wanted this pair of shoes, 800 pesos is something like $20, something like that. So I feel like that's a pretty fair price for shoes. So the only thing left to do is eat. So I've ducked into a very traditional bar slash restaurant. They got the wood bar over here. People are hustling, bustling. And the food here is very much like the food of the people. Pretty cheap, pretty basic. It's mostly pastas, sandwiches, and stuff with French fries, and then different kinds of meat. So I got churrasco del cuadro. So it's a piece of beef with some rice. And then we're gonna try some grappa. The traditional Uruguayan cafe, this is what you're gonna get. You're gonna get a big piece of beef with nothing on it, one piece of lettuce, and a pile of rice. I'm sure it tastes like beef and rice. I'll let you guys know. So after demolishing my steak, the last way to end your meal in Uruguay is to have a digestivo. something with a little bit of alcohol to make your stomach absorb all of that meat that you've just consumed in a nice, happy way. So grappa, the grappa culture, comes originally from the Italians, but here they make it with honey, which I've never seen in Italy. But I see the bottles being sold all over the place. So one last salud to a nice time in Montevideo. Huh. It's not very strong at all, very low alcohol content. It tastes like honey. I honestly wouldn't even know it was alcohol. It kind of tastes in a weird way like apple juice. All right, and I think that is gonna do it, guys. So from the land of mate, steak, marijuana, and good times, I will say thank you guys for watching. I hope you learned something new. Uruguay is a pretty special little country, and I think it's worth a visit if you're ever stopping by Buenos Aires. It's really not that far. Just take a little boat across the Rio de la Plata, and you'll be there in like 3.5, 4 hours. So, hope you guys enjoyed the episode. If you liked the video, make sure to like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, always helpful for me. And we will see you in our next Uruguayan location. Hasta luego.